The text came through 3 hours before our flight to Rome. I was folding my travel shirt when my phone buzzed on the nightstand, and I remember thinking Celeste was calling with some last-minute detail about the airport. Instead, I read the words twice before they made sense. This trip was family only now. Her husband, Darian, had decided I wouldn't be joining them. They were taking his parents instead. I sat on the edge of my bed next to my open suitcase and just stared at the screen. I was her father. I'd planned the entire trip, booked the flights, researched every restaurant, printed the walking tours myself, and now I'd been erased from it with a single text message. I typed back one word. Okay. Then I called the airline and canceled my ticket, listening to the agent's polite apology while I stared at the guidebooks stacked on my dresser, their pages marked with sticky notes for places I'd never see. I closed my suitcase slowly, deliberately, and sat in the silence of a house that suddenly felt much too big for one person. That evening, scrolling through Facebook out of habit more than curiosity, I found the photo. Darian's parents in front of the Colosseum, captioned, "Beginning of the best family vacation ever." Posted 2 hours earlier. My thumb hovered. Maybe it was an old photo. Then I found the second one. All four of them together near the Trevi fountain. Wine glasses on the table. Celeste's caption reading, "So grateful for family time in the eternal city." I counted the faces with a hand that had started to shake. 4. The word family glowed on the screen like something burning. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, with the time difference working in my favor, I called her. "I saw the pictures," I said. "Darian's parents are right there with you." The silence on the line told me everything before she spoke. "Dad, we can explain. You told me it was family only. Darian said you can be too much to handle," she said, her voice hardening with every word. "He didn't want you messing up his vacation." Too much to handle. I could hear Darian laughing at something in the background, oblivious, while his wife dismantled 26 years of fatherhood in a single phone call. "I helped support you," I said quietly. "That was something you decided to do," Celeste snapped. "We never asked you to make us feel guilty about it. Honestly, Dad, you need too much attention." I hung up without saying goodbye and sat there with the phone heavy in my hand, that phrase repeating like a stuck record. Need too much attention. I walked into my home office, surrounded by decades of photographs. Celeste on her first bicycle, her graduation, her wedding day. My arm around her as I walked her down the aisle. I'd spent $42,000 on that wedding. I'd paid off her student loans. I'd co-signed the mortgage on her house when the bank turned them down. $95,000 from my own retirement had gone toward their down payment. I'd covered car payments, credit card bills, even the vacation fund that had apparently just bought 4 plane tickets to Rome, none of them mine. It wasn't only the money. It was the fishing trip I'd canceled to babysit. The woman from my book club I'd turned down because Celeste needed help moving. Every Sunday dinner where Darian barely looked at me. Every holiday where I felt like a guest in my own family. I'd mistaken being useful for being loved. I turned the photos face down on my desk, one by one. Then my phone buzzed with a bank alert. Transaction processed. $892. Il Convivio Restaurant, Rome. Celeste still had authorized access to my card, a courtesy I'd extended years ago to help her build credit. While I sat here absorbing her cruelty, she was spending my money on lunch in Rome. Another alert followed. A boutique, then another. I opened the banking app, found her name on the account, and removed her access with a single tap. This cannot be undone. I selected yes anyway. For the first time in days, I felt something close to control. The call came the next morning, sharp and immediate. "Dad, what did you do to the card?" It was declined in front of Darian's parents. It was humiliating. "That must have been embarrassing," I said, sipping my coffee. "You need to fix this. Darian and I have been talking. When we get home, we're looking into care facilities for you. You're aging, Dad. You clearly can't manage money responsibly. We'll sell your house. You don't need all that space." I let the silence stretch long enough for her to hear exactly how absurd she sounded. Then I said, "No," and hung up. I finished my coffee looking out at the yard of the house I'd owned outright for 28 years. The house they thought they could sell out from under me. And that was when I remembered the deed to their house. 3 years earlier, I'd bought the property on Oak Avenue to help them qualify for a mortgage they couldn't get on their own. Just for approval, Dad. We'll switch it into our names once things settle. They never had. The deed still sat in my filing cabinet, my name the only one on it. I drove to see Kai Nakamura, the realtor who'd sold me both properties. I need to sell the Oak Avenue house, fast. He didn't ask many questions, just pulled comps and told me it could go for around $215,000, nearly $70,000 more than I'd paid. I signed the listing agreement on the spot. Next, I called a small moving company, Brent's. Family run, no corporate script. Whole house, I told him. Tomorrow morning, if you can. He didn't ask why. Men like Brent rarely do. That night, I laid out my old work clothes for the first time in years and slept better than I had all week. At 7:45 the next morning, Brent's truck idled outside the house I'd bought for my daughter. We moved through it room by room. The couch I'd given them for Christmas, Darian's gaming setup, Celeste's overflowing closets, the leather dining set I'd bought for their anniversary. In a box of wedding photos, I noticed I barely appeared in any of them. In what was meant to be a nursery, I found baby furniture never used. For a moment doubt crept in. Was I being too harsh? Then I found Darian's credit card statements, full of luxury purchases while they'd cried poverty to me for years. The doubt disappeared. By noon, the house stood empty, their entire life boxed and loaded into a storage unit on Pine Street. I paid Brent in cash with a generous tip and drove to sign the closing paperwork the following morning. The buyers, a young couple named Caspian and Nora, expecting their first child, fell in love with the place instantly. By Friday, the sale closed. $192,000 landed in my account. I drove by on Saturday, just to see. A U-Haul sat in the driveway. Nora was planting flowers. Caspian was building a swing set. My phone rang with an international number, just as a taxi pulled up across the street. Celeste climbed out first, exhausted from travel, her expression shifting from confusion to horror as she took in the moving truck and the strangers in her driveway. Darian paid the cabbie, then turned toward Caspian with open hostility. "Excuse me, what exactly are you doing in our house?" "Your house?" Caspian said, holding up his paperwork. "I think there's some misunderstanding." I got out of my car and walked toward them, an envelope in my jacket pocket. Celeste's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and then pure rage. "Dad, what is going on?" "That's not necessary," I said calmly to Nora, who'd reached for a garden trowel like she might need to defend her new home. Then I turned to the young couple. "I'm sorry for the confusion. Please, go ahead and move in. This doesn't concern you." They retreated gratefully into their new house. I faced my daughter and her husband. "The house was sold," I said, "because it belonged to me. It always did." "That's not possible," Darian said, his face reddening. "Check the original deed. It was never transferred into your names. You can't just steal our home." Celeste's voice cracked into that shrill register I'd heard my whole life whenever she didn't get her way. "I can absolutely sell my own property," I said, which is exactly what I did. "We'll sue you for everything you have," Darian threatened. "With what money? Your card got declined in Rome, remember?" I handed Celeste the envelope. Darian snatched it from her hands and read it aloud, his voice shaking. "Safekeep Storage, Unit 52C. You put our entire life in storage," Celeste whispered. "Everything's preserved. First month's already paid." "This is insane," Darian spat. "You can't do this to family." "Real family," I said, "doesn't exclude their father from a vacation he planned and paid for, then calls him needy for noticing." I left them standing on the sidewalk with their expensive luggage, looking like tourists who'd wandered into the wrong life. Darian shouted after me that this wasn't over. I got in my car, and my classical station picked up exactly where I'd left it. It was over. 3 months later, a process server delivered their lawsuit to my front porch. I signed for it without surprise. By that afternoon, my lawyer called with the ruling, dismissed. The house had been mine, The sale was legal, and Celeste and Darian were now responsible for their own legal fees. Word travels fast in a small town. At the coffee shop, I overheard neighbors taking sides, some sympathetic, some scandalized, that I'd abandoned family. I found I no longer cared much either way. A few weeks later, I adopted a golden retriever named Ranger from a family relocating overseas. He climbed into my passenger seat that same afternoon, tail wagging, and slept beside my bed that night. For the first time in months, neither of us was alone. I traded in my second car, added some savings, and bought a 28-foot Airstream. Ranger claimed the front seat before I'd even finished the paperwork. I packed camping gear, his leash, and one photo album, pictures of Celeste as a little girl, before everything became about what I could provide instead of who I was. The morning we left Cedar Falls, I drove past Oak Avenue one last time. Caspian and Nora's children were playing in the yard, sunlight pouring over a house finally filled with the kind of happiness it had been built for. The highway sign read, Montana, 850 miles. Ranger had his head out the window. My hand was steady on the wheel. That evening, we pulled over at an overlook as the sun dropped behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange I'd never stopped to notice before. Ranger settled beside me, asking for nothing but company. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I was meant to be.